Welcome back to The Gray Area, the podcast where we step into the gray areas of justice. I'm your host, Ashlyn, and today's episode asks a very difficult question. When a young person commits a violent crime, should they be treated as an adult? Let me tell you a story. One chilly night in November, in a small town, 16-year-old Gavin Prescott is pacing inside a convenience store for 20 minutes. Hoodie strings pulled so tight he can barely see, and his hands were shaking. Inside, a man argues loudly with the cashier. Gavin flinches every time the door opens. Earlier that day, Gavin's older cousin dared him to prove himself. He was supposed to prove he wasn't weak, prove he wasn't just some little kid anymore, prove he could handle the pressure. Gavin had grown up being taught that survival meant toughness. His home life was very hostile and toxic. He had grown up to learn that being in fear meant that you were failing. So when the argument inside escalates, Gavin proceeds. He pulls out a gun, one he barely knows how to use, and walks up to the register. Everything happened in just seconds. A shout, a gunshot, silence. No one dies, but the cashier is severely injured. Gavin doesn't run. He just stands there, frozen, as if the world had stopped making sense. At trial, the prosecutor argues that this was an intentional act of violence. Gavin knew what he was doing. He had a weapon, and he pulled the trigger. The defense argues something different. Gavin is just a child. He's impulsive, easily influenced, and afraid. He was just a kid trying to survive in the only world he knew. The judge has a decision to make. Should Gavin be tried as an adult, or should he get another chance at adulthood? Stories like Gavin's, while they are fictional, yes, but deeply realistic, forces us to confront how we understand responsibility. The idea of trying juveniles as adults is rooted in simple belief that some crimes are so serious they override age. But science and psychology tell us something important. Adolescents are not just mini adults. The teenage brain is still developing, specifically in areas tied to impulse control, decision-making, and understanding long-term consequences. While that doesn't excuse harm, it does change how we interpret intent. Young people are more susceptible to peer pressure, more likely to act emotionally, and less likely to fully grasp the permanence of their actions. In Gavin's case, was that moment in the store a true thought-out, calculated decision, or was it a panicked reaction deeply rooted by fear, identity, and pressure? There's also the question of what happens after conviction. When juveniles are tried as adults, they often enter adult prison systems. Prison systems are designed for punishment, not rehabilitation. Studies have shown that young offenders in adult facilities are more likely to reoffend, not less. Instead of being redirected, they're hardened. So the real question becomes, are we pursuing punishment or the possibility of change? Because if we believe young people are capable of growth, then treating them as fully formed adults must ignore one clear truth. They're still becoming who they are. So now let's bring it back to the audience. Let's bring it back to you. Imagine you're the judge in Gavin's case. You've heard the evidence, you've seen the footage, you've listened to the victim's family who wants justice. But you've also heard about Gavin's life. The unstable home, the pressure to fit in, the lack of guidance, the fear. You know that trying him as an adult could mean decades in prison, a life defined by one irreversible moment. You also know that keeping him in the juvenile system might offer rehabilitation. Some say it risks minimizing the severity of the crime. So what do? Do you prioritize the harm caused or the potential for change? At what point does a young person's actions outweigh their age? There's no easy answer. But maybe the better question is, if justice is about building a safer environment, which choice actually gets us there? I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you do? Thank you for listening to The Gray Area. I'm your host, Ashlyn. Until next time, stay curious.